Teachers of Reddit, what was the best excuse for being late that turned out to be true? A kid's apartment burned down overnight. He was a little late, but still came. Now that's dedication. Now that's the parents needing to figure out and not wanting to have to take care of the kid for a couple of hours. Told me he got pulled over by the cops for wobbly driving on his bike and they thought he was drunk. Turned out he was just dodging all the slugs on the street. Did he tell them he was sluggish? One of my organ students told me he was late arriving for his lesson because he got stuck behind a lengthy funeral procession en route to the cemetery. I knew he was telling the truth because I had played the organ for the service earlier that morning and the church was packed. This happened to me as a pupil. A very quiet, unassuming kid in our class came into German with about 5 minutes of the class left. We went to a Catholic school and the teachers were all quite strict and intimidating. Classes were usually silent, especially in junior school. When this boy came into class at the end of the lesson that day, the door flew inwards with such force that the teacher gave an audible gasp. It had been raining heavily outside, his hair was plastered to his forehead. His blazer was dripping and sodden. He had mud caked into his trousers up to his knees, and he was breathing heavily. The teacher exclaimed, "Brendan. What happened?" We all stared up at him in shocked silence. This quiet, unassuming little boy let out a big sigh and just said, "I took a shortcut," and went straight to his seat. That line became iconic in our school for years afterwards. That kid had obviously been through a whole coming-of-age movie and this was the last line before the credits rolled. I like to think he took a seat, smirked slightly, then looked straight at the camera as it faded to black. Not me but in my class. This was in college. Student turned in work late after not showing up for 2 classes. 2 classes amounted to a full week so it was noticeable. Professor looked at him and said, "I hope somebody died for you to be this late. Does my dad count?" he screamed. Honestly, I've always heard you can hear a pin drop and never really thought anything of it, but yeah, you could hear a f***ing pin cut through the air after that. A kid missed my first period class one morning, but was in school later that day. When I asked him why he hadn't arrived in time for my course, he said his cow was birthing its calf that morning, so he'd picked being in the barn over English. Made sense to me. His essays weren't going to win any ribbons at the county fair, but his calf could. We had an exam in my class and the teacher got a message from a student saying that he was going to be late because his car had a flat tire. The student was known to party. The teacher didn't think it could be true, so as a joke the teacher asked him to bring the tire back. He brought the flat tire back in the middle of the exam. Needless to say, the professor didn't expect that. That student had been partying. Drives to school, takes off tire, punctures it, and Bob's your Aunt Mary. When I was in college, my psych professor told us that the only excuse for being late was a funeral procession. Any other reason, you wouldn't be allowed to come in. A few weeks into the semester, I was headed from one building to another, which involved crossing the main road. Lo and behold, there was one very long funeral procession going by. I got a short video of it as proof, then stood on the sidewalk to let it go by. Unfortunately, the procession made me 5 minutes late to class. I knocked on the door, and the professor came over to start to tell me off. I showed her the video. "Well, I'll be damned, come on in." I'm an English professor, and one year a pretty good student showed up without one of his 2 major term papers. He explained that his safe had been stolen by a contractor who was working on their house. His laptop was in the safe, and that's where his paper was. I genuinely believe him because he'd been a really good student. Then over the next few weeks, he started to show up to class looking very tired. He said that he was on a hunt for the person who stole his safe, and he was spending late nights with his cousin driving around looking for the guy because they knew his van. Now, the student and his cousin were both recently back from tours in Iraq and had seen combat experience. They wanted to find the guy to beat the shit out of him and get the safe back because his wife's wedding ring was in the safe as well as a bunch of cash. He rewrote the paper and turned it in, apologetic that it wasn't up to his usual quality, but he still kept coming to class looking like he hadn't slept. After a little while he came very happy to my office hours, and he reported that he found the guy after a long search that involved breaking into a meth den, shaking people down with baseball bats and even bribing some prostitutes. He said that they found the guy's van at a Taco Bell after getting a tip from a prostitute, and they cornered him and waited for the police to come. I read in the news that he had in fact done a citizen's arrest and stopped the guy at a Taco Bell, and that they ended up calling in the Secret Service because he used the cash that he stole from the safe to buy a bunch of counterfeiting equipment. Secret Service apparently investigates counterfeiting, so the whole investigation happened because this guy who I dubbed the White Shaft tracked the scumbag down through the bad side of town late at night to get a wedding ring, some cash, and his research paper back. It all turned out to be true. He got the ring and the laptop back. I gladly accepted his original paper, and it got a much higher grade than the rewrite. There's like a whole season of a new show there, right? No shit, I'd watch the Netflix original of this. Not a teacher, but a kid walked into my class one day and literally just said, "Sorry I'm late, I didn't want to be here." I had a 6-year-old turn up late to her lesson and blurt out, "Sorry I was late, I had to color in a bunny." Seems fair. I was one of about 20 kids who were late to school. We showed up at the school office as a group, and when questioned why we were late, we said, "The school bus blew up." They questioned, "So the engine blew up?" The kids, "No, the whole bus, in flames. It blew up." There was much conference between the teachers, all of them thinking we embellished the story. Next thing you know, one of the admin staff has the news website open, very obvious image of an entire bus on fire with a bunch of kids in our school uniform standing in front of it. Our late slip for class read, "School bus blew up." If that happened I would walk home. If you could walk. After 9/11, my small-town high school received bomb threats every week for 2 months, and they decided to make us attend school on a Saturday. Myself and about 5 others showed up for our classes, and every teacher said something like, "I can't wait for the excuses on Monday." Most of the excuses were something along the lines of family plans or whatnot, but one kid was made read his dad's note aloud to the class because our first period teacher thought it was hilarious. In the most down south accent you can imagine, it went something like, "My son ain't too smart, but he knows you ain't supposed to get punished for someone else being a dumbass. Bought him a 6-pack, so he was drunk. Y'all can off. I wish we had smartphones to record back then so I could share it." My best story ever. I taught in a hardcore inner city school. My student comes in at 10:30. I was like, "Dude, where were you?" "Oh, my bus was late." "Yeah, no, why would your bus be 3 hours late?" "Well miss, there was a drive-by shooting." "OMG, are you okay? Someone shot at the bus?" "No ma'am, a kid shot a gun out of the bus. We got pulled over. The cops had to search everyone. The kid with the gun was literally the last kid to be searched." True story, you can't make this up. When I was student teaching, I was late because there was bunch chickens in the middle of the road. They wouldn't move at all. This is in the middle of a city of 200,000 people. Freaking chickens. I finally get to school and profusely apologize to my mentor teacher, and I told her why I was late thinking it sounded ridiculous. She said, "Yeah, those chickens are they surrounded my car in the McDonald's parking lot last year. Don't worry about yeah, those chickens are they surrounded my car in the McDonald's parking lot last year. Don't worry about they were protesting the McChicken sandwich." I am a teacher, but this happened when I was a student. Does it count? In high school a kid came late to history class. He was a joker, so when someone asked him where he had been, he goes, "I was kidnapped." Everyone laughed, until he goes, "No really." Turns out 2 guys kidnapped him and tossed him into the back of the minivan he was using for his morning paper route. They drove him around while they robbed something. I can't remember what happens after. I think they just drove the van somewhere and got away. Sorry, Bohemian Rhapsody came on just as I parked my art teacher when he was about 5:55 minutes late. Also would have stayed.